It was Steinbeck, wasn't it, who said of mice and men? I never read Steinbeck, I have to confess. Most of my readings back in the day would have been more like comic books and stuff, but this is of sheep and shepherds is kind of because last week we looked at the voices that haunt, and we were looking at John 10 and some of the details that had to do with that, and this is kind of plays off of it. And so John 10 sort of starts it where Jesus says, I'm the gate, I'm the shepherd, and so forth and so on. Well, the Old Testament doesn't count. The Old Testament's not relevant. That deserves a hearty push-off. That is simply not true because Testament. Now, obviously, when you hear of shepherds, what do you first think of? The 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. So we're going to go there to the 23rd Psalm. It's a familiar place. It's one that most people on a good day can mangle the reproduction of it, and sometimes you can get most of it right. But it's Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, that is such a reassuring psalm, but it can also be abused. People sometimes will be intentionally wandering off the path away from the shepherd, prone to wander, as we were just singing. And then we look for the safety that should be there instead of depending on the safety that is there, and because we're walking on the path of righteousness. So this is not a license to go crazy. This is if you're being led to where you're supposed to be led. You don't let a shepherd do. What was the daily routine of a shepherd? Well, first of all, most of the time, not all the time, but there would be a holding pen, a place where the sheep would go at night. There would be more than one shepherd bring their sheep there. These sheep would not stick their nose up at the sheep next to them. Oh, you're not from my flock. You know, they don't sick them from fetching. You could care less. And they're all just there, and all these sheep are milling about. How do you get your sheep back? Well, the morning call. One guy might whistle. It's a different whistle. One guy might call. It's a different call. Each one of these would be familiar to the sheep, and the sheep would then gravitate towards their person. Probably, if there were 4 shepherds there, the first guy would get his flock out first. The second guy would get his flock out second, and so forth and so on until the entire, each herd was on its way with its shepherd. One of the things that they would then do, once they got out of the pen, we got to find pasture. This was an arid region. This isn't like where you can walk, so they may have to walk, and they may have to walk a long way. And then, of course, if you need grass, you also need water. And it says, he leads me beside still waters. Now, why would it need to be still? Because sheep are full of fleece, right? And if it's running water and the sheep gets in the water, they're okay for a little while because that fleece has a lot of air in it. The air's kind of buoyant, and the sheep can kind of do its thing. But when the sheep starts to get waterlogged, the sheep's not in such good shape anymore. So they're not the best swimmers, especially when they get wet. But still waters, then that's going to be much easier because I'm not having to worry about losing the sheep. Once they found the pasture, once they found the water, then somewhere in the midday they would rest, somewhere around the mid-afternoon, and they look for a shaded area. Hopefully that's where the water supply would be. It gets hot in that area, like our kind of hot, maybe even a little bit more hot. So just sitting out there, I had the distinct pleasure the other day of trying to help my son-in-law to keep up with where he was at because with his mother's sickness and stuff. So after lunch, was it Saturday, I think, or maybe it was Friday, I don't recall. I said, well, yeah, 98 degrees, and it was about 4.5 hours later, and it was like, I'm ready to go home. It's hot, and this is a daily occurrence for these people. So they would look for a place to rest. And then all the time, this is like a field trip. Anytime you take a flock of kids out, if you leave with 44, you want to come back with 44. You're counting, you're counting, you're counting. We'd take kids to Washington, D.C. When they got on the bus, they were counting. When they got off the bus, they were counting. When they got to the museum, they were counting. When they got back from the museum, everything was a count. And so too with the shepherd. He would be counting the flock. And then it would be night, so it would be time to put the sheep back in the closure. So now the whole trek is back to there. And sometimes the closure would have a gate. And if it had a gate, then it had a gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper would stand there as the sheep come through, let the sheep in. Sometimes there's no gate. If there's no gate and they're in the pen, where do you think the shepherd slept or rested?
By the gate.
In the gate, in the path. So that would be a way of making sure either the sheep didn't get out, prone to wander, or that animals and prey or robbers and thieves didn't. First of all was the rod, mentioned in the 23rd Psalm. That was just a club. You wore it on your belt. It typically would have a round head and maybe some iron flint in it. It was a weapon. And it was defended if you were walking along and you got attacked by a wolf or something got attacked. Here's your club. And then you would have a staff. Now we've all seen the shepherd's staff, right? Typically it had a curved hook on it, kind of long. Why would it be curved? Because when the sheep was prone to wander, he could yank it back. You could get it out of, say, stuck in a thicket or something like that. It served a useful purpose. And then there was also a sling. What would you have a sling for? Because they were very good. That was a very efficient way of keeping things away. So when David and Goliath had their little set to, when he said, I'm going to pick up stones and so forth and so on, this wasn't I just had an idea. This was something that he had been literally immersed in. He understood the notion of this thing can be used as a weapon, and he was good at it. And then, of course, there would also be, might have a few stones in it for defense. Very seldom did the shepherd eat meat. It was mostly going to be dried fruit, bread, olives, the food of the ground, if you will, or the earth. If there was a sheep that needed to be culled, that might be cooked and eaten. But otherwise, for the most part, the flock was not considered a food source yet. That was for the sacrifice. And then finally, there would be a little flute that most of them would carry. And the flute was something that to entertain himself. And if you've ever seen the videos of people that the guy sits out and plays a guitar, and then this animal comes walking up and is fascinated by the guitar and so forth and so on. It's a source that also attracts the herd. So this is who the shepherd was. This is what he did day to day, day in, day out. Protect the flock, move the flock out, find a food source, find a water source, find still waters, find green grass. And this notion of being restored by doing that. So the 23rd Psalm carries just a lot of imagery in it. And we talked about David. And you know the story, it's in 1 Samuel, but it's very familiar. It says, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. But David says to Saul, well, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. So there we go, I'm a shepherd. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it with my rod, rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paws of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Now, all of that would have been known to the listeners of Jesus in John 10. All of that. Because all of these stories were familiar. And David was a hero of the country. So with that in mind, with that background, listen to the story again in John 10. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. Because here's this enclosure, and there's one way in, and there's one way out. And if you're not using that, you're not legit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. The Pharisees didn't understand any of that. They were trying to put it all together, and Jesus says, well, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes to kill and steal and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And then he goes on. I am the good shepherd. So first he was the gate, now he's the shepherd. So it's just this whole imagery of everything that the shepherd does. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees a wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs because he's a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen, and I bring them also. So we're getting these people are just their heads probably exploding listening to all this. Sheep that are not of this pen, that we're Israel, we're blessed, and then they will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me. I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up. That command I received from my Father. The Jews who heard these words were divided. Many of them said, he is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why even listen to him? Because he was saying things that were absolutely without precedent. To John 10, this is the period between the first part of John 10 and the second part of John 10 is about 3 months. Because the first part of John 10 is the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Tents, and that is going on about October. The second part of this, which we're going to read in just a second, the second part of John 10 is taking place during Hanukkah. And that is about December. So this first part that we've read here, imagine that taking place in October, where he's calling himself the shepherd. He's calling himself, I'll lay down my life. He's telling these people, I have the authority to lay down my life if I want to, and I will pick it back up again. This was unbelievably revolutionary to anybody that was hearing it. So here's some of the things that were symbolic in that. In John, in 10:7, he refers to himself as the door, as the gate. In ancient field closures, like we said, the shepherds sometimes literally slept across the opening because sheep will wander, but predators would try to get in. And if there was the actual gate, then you can. Jesus referred to himself as the gate, the gatekeeper, both of them. And we know that, again, in the ancient times with the shepherds, they recognized their voices. And so the way that they were all called out or called in would have been because of the people that were the person that was leading them. So that's that. We've discussed that. But then there was the thing about the hired hand working for wages and flees when a wolf attacks. The good shepherd owns the sheep, values their lives. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And then there was this just out of the blue, can't figure this out. Where did it come from? Because it's not in our theology. He's talking like he's crazy. He says that he'll lay down his life willingly for the flock. And he points that out, well, a human shepherd, or a shepherd that's doing this for the motives of not being the owner, might risk his life to fight all predators, but this is the whole thing about Jesus intentionally laying down his life. Now, the whole point of this whole thing from about John 7 all the way up to right here where it culminates in just a second is, I'm trying to tell you guys I'm the Messiah. I am who I said I would be. There was this man that has been forecast to come to you, and it was going to be the anointed of God. I'm him. So he was telling this unique thing about, I'm going to lay down my life. Now, when you hear that, I think of the Secret Service. If you join the Secret Service, one of the things that you sign up for is you realize part of your responsibility is to take a bullet for the President of the United States. Your life is not as important as his life or her life, whoever the president may be. That's the mission. That's the mission that you sign up for. But that doesn't tell you a thing about whether you actually like, hate, loathe, sort of like the president. It's irrelevant. You may like the president, you're expected to die for him. You may hate the president, you're still expected to die for him. Your personal feelings about the president have no bearing upon the actions you're supposed to take. That's radically different from what Jesus was teaching. Jesus was basically saying, I don't have a duty to protect you. There's nothing obligating me to do this. I choose to do this. The interesting thing is that this whole thing of trying to tell people that I am the Messiah, he was trying to gather the flock together. When he enters Jerusalem for the last time, what does he say? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you up under my, like a mother's would protect her chicks. This notion of I wanted to bring you in. I've done everything I can, but you wouldn't listen. And so then they were judged. But here's the interesting thing. Because they wouldn't come when he called, he chose to die. And that needs to be appreciated. And he chose to die not because he had to, but because he had the authority to bring himself to be resurrected, to pick his life back up again. Power from God. So the idea I've heard it said sometimes, and I think it kind of, if I remember correctly, not that it, but it was from a Catholic friend. Well, he had to do that, or he was forced to do it. No, he wasn't. Jesus was not compelled to die. He was not. It was not with a knife in his back. This was a voluntary thing, and he announced it clearly and plainly. All right, so that's what took place in October. And then there's a 3-month lull between the Feast of Tabernacles and then Hanukkah. And so then it comes to verse 22. And it says this. Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was winter, and the festival of dedication is Hanukkah. It was winter, and Jesus was in the temple courts walking in Solomon's colonnade. The Jews who were there gathered around him saying, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." And that's why this is in past tense. And obviously many of these people, this was an ongoing 3-month back and forth. He says, "I did tell you, but you do not believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify about me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand." They're protected in my enclosure that I have built for these sheep, and that is protected by Almighty God himself through Jesus. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. And then he says this remarkable statement, "I and the Father are one." Now he's been talking about dying 3 months earlier. Now he's saying, "I and the Father are one, and I can willingly give my life, and then I can take it back." This is the reason my Father loves me, is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. That's what he was trying to tell these people. I and the Father are one. Well, the ones who had decided that he was a madman actually took what would be an expected reaction to that statement. They picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus said to them, "I've shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me?" And they said, "We are not stoning you for any good work, but for blasphemy, because you are a mere man that is claiming to be God." Now we have the advantage of the resurrection. That hasn't occurred yet. In fact, the crucifixion hasn't occurred yet. So these people were being called by the shepherd to hear the voice, and they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to the point that he said, "Very well, since you won't listen to that, I'm going to give the ultimate act of shepherding. I'm going to clear. If you reject Jesus, you reject God. I and the Father are one. If you somehow try to separate them into different persons or into different entities, it could be not having the same essence, God in 3 persons, perfect Trinity, then you basically have committed a grave offense, because to reject Jesus is to reject God. Now, to be a good shepherd, you have to be a sheep. The Lord is my shepherd, David said. But David shepherded a nation. but he couldn't shepherd the nation if he wasn't willing to be led. When the shepherd would take the flock out, the shepherd wouldn't stay in the back. The shepherd would stay in the front because the shepherd was leading the way. And the flock would follow because they would know the voice, and this was familiar. And so there was a relationship there that had to make, in order to be the shepherd you're going to have to turn from the sheep within our lives as maturing, and at some point we're going to start shepherding. And that is the other Old Testament allusion that shows up. Because in Ezekiel 34, it gives a far different description of shepherds. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, why woe to you shepherds of Israel who only take care of yourselves? Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You ruled them harshly and brutally. They scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they scattered, they became food for the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched to look for them. And remember, Jesus said, I've got flocks beyond y'all. There's other flocks. There's larger flocks. But this scattering, this notion of the people who were supposed to be, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, they should have been following that model. And what it had turned into, these people are my shepherd, and I want a whole bunch because they are not following the biblical standard of shepherding. And then he turns to the flock in verse 17. Because the flock doesn't get off of this easy either. As for you, my flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will judge between one sheep and another. Because sometimes when we run as a pack, what do we think? Well, I'm protected by the pack. I can be a jerk because everybody else in the pack is a jerk. He says, well, I will judge between one sheep and another, between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? How many times there was an old preacher that probably remember this saying, Jim, get all you can all you get, and screw up the rest. That's what some people like to do. Get all you can all you get. Once you get it, you hold on to it, you hoard it, you don't give it to anybody else, and you screw up the rest to where nobody else has anything. That is exactly what this is referring to. The flock is who? Now, today, who's the flock? The flock are the followers of Jesus. And they need steel-toed boots here. Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? Must my flock feed on what you have trampled and drink what you have muddied with your feet? Now there's a clear picture that we both follow Christ and are shepherded by Christ, but we are also, the flock has an obligation beyond just going with Christ. We are to reach out to others that are, as it says here, that are injured, that are weak, that are sick, that are lost. We don't look for them. We don't care because I'm fat and happy. And that's all I need, and that's all I want. And if you're screwed up, it's probably because you deserve to be screwed up, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And God says in Ezekiel, just so you know, I will judge between one sheep and another. It doesn't talk about you're not going to be kicked out of the flock, But come Judgment Day, you're probably going to have to go, that one's on me. That one's on me too. We're going to give an accounting for how well we followed the shepherd. Those that have been shepherded, those that follow Jesus, have an obligation to shepherd in due time. The sheep become the shepherd. We as believers should be mindful of sheep that are sick, sheep that are weak, sheep that are lost. Shepherds always have responsibility for the sheep. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have our barbecue pit ordered and secured for shipment. It will be coming in soon. This will be our opportunity as a church to turn from sheep, where we follow Christ, into shepherds, where we gather the flock. This will be an opportunity to reach out to the sick and the injured and the hurt. And I would imagine anytime you do, there's also a pretty good likelihood that old Scratch is not going to be real happy about it. And there'll be some haruffing going on, perhaps. And this is where you remember, since I follow the sheep on the path of righteousness, or follow the shepherd on the path of righteousness, in other words, I'm trying to go where I am being led. Those sins are already covered. I don't have to worry about this. What's the big deal? And the imagery is so jacked up. If you're doing that, it's time to read Ezekiel 34. But if we're following the shepherd, not a shepherd, the shepherd, then we have a place at the table when people try to buck us. In the midst of the most troubling times, we can remember that Christ, as the shepherd, has a rod and a staff, and that they're there to protect us, to comfort us. Most importantly, as part of the flock, we should remember that we cannot be taken from God's hand. There is no enemy, there's no prey, there's no thief, there's no robber, there's no hyena, there's no bear, there's no that is able to take us from the hand of God. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. Now, the whole idea of death, because there's nothing that can be done that can destroy the soul. And so as we move into these opportunities, they need to, number one, be fun. Not a burden. Not well, happy me for Jesus. And they need to be eyes and ears open, because one of the truest things I ever heard, which is, you want to be a better sheep, you want to, by shepherding others, you become a better sheep for the shepherd. Let me say it another way. We had a big to-do one time where and one of the guys there, when we got through, we were sitting down, and he volunteered. He put in a lot of time, and we just sat down afterwards after about several hours, and he said something that was so profound. He said, I thought I showed up here today because I was here to help somebody. I didn't realize that this was going to help me. In order to be When we have a heart for the lost, when we have a heart for the sick, then we have the heart of Christ. And by having the heart of Christ, you become more in tune with what is the path of righteousness. And by knowing which way you should walk, you are more likely to be less likely to wander, because you are doing the things you need to do rather than doing the things you shouldn't do. So, number one, it needs to be fun, it needs to be enjoyable. But number two, we also need to be opportunistic, because I will bet 2 pretty good fishing rods that there's going to be, you're going to hear some stories and hear some things that it's like some of them are going to manipulate, some of them are going to try and cheat their way around. And some people are going to be legit. The sheep will be judged. Each one of those flock will be judged individually. We will be judged on our attitude. I was helping a guy the other day with his trailer, waiting for him to bring a tire back. I don't know. I just attract these people. And man, because I think I'm not good looking, and I know I had a sour look on my face because it was hot as blazes and I was ready to go home. And man, I just, I tell you what I can do. I can give you, here's $20. Go get $10 worth of gas, bring me back to 10. Is that, oh yeah, that's good. So I watched him walk out to get a gas station with several pumps, and he got in his car. Now, this one was probably on me, because I said, like about 60 yards across from the, it was a ways, and I was in full coaching voice, and I was like, hey. And he said, oh, I was just driving around to give you the, now he did have $10. He had the $10 in his hand. But that makes sense. I'd like to think that he was going to drive around and give it to me. I'm going to put that one on me. So I apologize for not recognizing the person's true intent. But we're going to run into people when you hand them the $20, they're going to get in their car and do what? I'm out of here. And that is the same thing that Jesus saw when he tried to convince these people, listen to me. And they wouldn't. And since they wouldn't listen to him, he said that the stupid things don't poison the well. In fact, we need to be celebrating that we have the opportunity to bring the flock in. So it'll be fun. And I hope that, and it also will not be burdensome, because we'll make sure of that. So, the one thing to remember is that we are all sheep, we are all shepherds, and we can't be taken from God's hand. Nothing will separate us, nothing. And that is cause for celebration. Amen? Amen. Well, Father, thank you for being a shepherd. A shepherd that is worthy of being followed, worthy of being trusted, worthy of teaching us how to be shepherds ourselves, how to be able to interact with those who are having problems, how to be gracious, how to be humble, how to be forgiving, how to be patient. Fruits of the Spirit that oftentimes we just assume maybe we didn't have to deal with that, but you can't develop those fruits of the Spirit until they're challenged. So may our efforts to honor you also reach fertile ground. And when they don't, may we be patient, because who's to say that it's not the second, third, or fourth time that the message finally sticks. So we thank you for the example that you gave us of being a shepherd, and we ask you for the wisdom to demonstrate the type of shepherd that you want to see. And we hope that by doing this, everything that is done honors you and the cause. It's in your Son's name we pray.